The last video introduced you to how this class works in terms of navigating the assignments page, accessing the e-text, and some other different course resources. But there's a bigger question that leads to some initial confusion for people in this program, and that is how do you progress through the course, or what's your ultimate goal? And the question is, a lot of that is up to you. There are a few different ways to progress through this course. That depends on where you're starting in the program, what material you already know, or with a little bit of review could become familiar enough with to test out of. So let's start with our initial option, assuming that you're starting in Math 091. So if you're starting in Math 091, your goal for the semester is to complete Milestone 1. That means you need to complete Module 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So again, there are different ways to go about doing that. The very first option to consider is trying to pre-test to place out of Milestone 1. This is optional, you don't have to try it, but you can take a look at your syllabus to see what content's covered in all of Math 91. If you feel like you could pre-test out of that, we're giving you the option to skip out of that entire course. So if you could pass that pre-test to place out with a 75% or better, then you'll skip right to Milestone 2 or skip straight to Math 092, the next course in the sequence. So you have the potential to skip an entire semester's worth of coursework. That may not be an option for you. You may not feel prepared to tackle a test like that, and that's fine. If you do attempt it and score less than a 75%, or if you decide to simply not attempt it, you can just jump straight into Module 1. So in Module 1, you again are faced with a couple of questions or a couple of options. The first is to consider taking a pretest to skip out of the content in Module 1. Again, this is based off passing a test with a score of at least a 75%. So if you could pass a pretest over those initial concepts with a 75% or better, then you'll have passed Module 1 and you get to skip on to Module 2. The alternative is if you don't pass that pretest, so if you get it something below a 75%, or if you choose to not take the pretest, it is just an option, then what you would do is work through Module 1. Each module consists of a different number of sections, but you would work through some individual content, watching videos, completing homework assignments, progress checks, completing your guided notebook. Once all of that work was completed, then you would have an attempt at the post-test. Actually, you have as many attempts as you need to pass that post-test. Initially, we give you 2. You have 2 attempts to pass that post-test. If you're unable to do that, then what you do is review that test with an instructor. We point out what you are missing, give you some pointers for the next attempt, and then we open up some more attempts for you. Once you do pass that post-test with a 75% or better, then you've completed Module 1 and you're now ready to move on to Module 2. So all the information on this chart can seem a little overwhelming at first, but every module follows that same pattern. When you get to Module 2, you have the option to pre-test and skip ahead through that content, or you can work through the module, get to the post-test at the end, and then finish up Module 2 that way. So again, you have the big jump at the opportunity for a big jump at the beginning by passing the placement test, skipping out of all of Milestone 1 and jumping a semester's worth of coursework ahead. And then with each individual module, you have the opportunity for a pre-test to try to move through that material faster. Again, any of those pre-tests, placement tests, those are options. Every time you hit a new module, you also have the option just to decide to work through the content, take the post-test, so essentially you'll learn and review that material, and then take a post-test at the end. You'll continue to do that with each of the modules, each of the milestones. So we could look at Math 92, it would have a similar progression. There's a placement test to try to place out, or you can work through the individual modules, again, with each opportunity giving you a pre-test or the option to simply work through the material and take a post-test at the end. So for Math 092, you would need to complete Module 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12, either by pre-testing, working through each of those individual assignments. For Math 093, again, we have a similar pattern, but fewer modules to work through. So the content module, Milestone 3, Math 093, starts to become a little more rigorous. So there are fewer modules to work through, but the content should take you about the same amount of time. You'll need to work through modules 13, 14, 15, and 16. Or again, you have an option to try to pre-test a place out of that entire milestone and skip ahead. The last course in this developmental sequence is Math 094, Milestone 4. Again, there are just 4 modules here, 17, 18, 19, and 20 to work through. And again, you have those different options. You can pre-test or work through the individual modules. The one thing that is different here is there's no opportunity to place out of this course. Once you get to Math 94, we do just expect you to work through those 4 individual modules. But again, you do still have the option to pre-test through that material. Now, most students won't end up getting all the way to Math 094 because it's not required for your degree program. And let's talk about these different paths just a little bit. So Heartland's math curriculum has a few different tracks depending on what you need for your degree program. The first thing I would say is if you don't know what college level math course you need for your degree, it's a really good idea to talk to an advisor. But this program starts with Math 091. Once you complete Math 091, or if you've placed ahead of that, you'll move on to Math 092. Once you complete that, or if you've placed at a higher level, you'll move on to 093. Geometry is available to you as soon as you pass Math 092, beginning algebra. So if geometry is a course that's required for you, as soon as you pass Math 092, you'll be able to take that. But once you get to Math 093, that's when we start getting into some different options that branch out a little bit here. So once Math 093 is completed, one of the most common tracks at Heartland is for people to go into one of our general education math courses, meaning after you complete intermediate algebra level 1, you're eligible to take explorations in math, Math 131, or Math 141, Introduction to Statistics. So those are our 2 general education courses. They're available to you as soon as this Math 93 course is completed. And for some degrees, these are your terminal math courses. That's all you would need to take. Other students, particularly if you're going into a business program after completing Math 93, would go on to Math 106, College Algebra for the Business and Social Sciences, and after that, 3 different courses in that business sequence open up for you depending on what you need to take, again, for your degree. With Math 93 completed, you also have the opportunity to move on to one of the teacher ed courses. So if you're planning on going into elementary education, once you've completed Math 93, you're also eligible to move into Math 135, Math for elementary teachers, and then Math 136 after that. The other option, or the other track, is for people going into the math science track. Once you've completed Math 93, if you're planning on going into one of the sciences or math or engineering, most likely you'll be going on to Math 094, Intermediate Algebra Level 2. Once that course is completed, then 2 different courses will open up for you, Math 109 and Math 128, College Algebra and Trigonometry, which then, once those are completed, open up the rest of the math science sequence. Calc 1, Calc 2, and then depending on what you need, Calc 3, linear algebra, and differential equations. So again, a key thing to keep in mind with all these different options is to check with your advisor to see which courses you need to take for your degree program. There are certain courses that open up even after completing just Math 091 pre-algebra. So depending on your program, you'll have to continue to different points in this curriculum.